The government is now working on a COVID-19 pandemic exit plan after the peak of the Omicron variant surge. To give us his insights, we have molecular biologist and OCTA member, Father Nick Austriaco, joining us over Zoom. Father Nick, there seems to be a rush to enter the so-called COVID-19 endemic state. Are we actually ready for this? And is it actually safe enough to assume that we are indeed at this phase?
Good evening, Sean. Thank you for inviting me this evening. Well, I think what you're seeing throughout the world is this realization that after the Omicron wave passes, a population has significant immunological memory that makes it easier for us to imagine entering a time where the pandemic will be relatively mild, which is why I think the Philippines is joining countries around the world to try to imagine moving our people from a state of crisis to a state of responsibility and control in anticipation of a time where we will live with the virus for the foreseeable future.
Right. This makes me have to ask, Father Nick, can we go back to the way things used to be? Or is there really going to be, we've been slinging around this term new normal. Is it really going to be a little bit different? And if so, what major changes should the public expect in terms of new restrictions that we have to take as, just a part of daily life once we are indeed at that endemic stage?
So, the transition, so we are transitioning now from a pandemic to an endemic stage, and it's not clear how long this transition will be. So you have to distinguish the transition to this final endemic stage. In the final endemic stage, what you will see is really what you see with flu, where there will be surges of flu season during a particular few months during the year. We would have something similar, a COVID season. At that point, vulnerable people would be encouraged to be boosted or vaccinated. We may even have to return to masks for a brief period of time if there is a spike in cases. But the idea here is that we are moving to a stage where our society learns to live with the virus and not be in a constant state of crisis.
All right, Father Nick, there is another proposal, once, of course, we do hit the endemic stage, to completely scrap the alert level system altogether, at least in areas with high vaccination rates. Can this be possible, Father, to take apart the country piecemeal, or even the whole world if you step back? Do you agree that this is,
I imagine that the alert system is going to be very similar to the typhoon signal system. The typhoon signal system is always there, but we don't really refer to it until we see a low pressure region or a possible typhoon enter the Philippine area of responsibility. So you can imagine a scenario where the alert system is there, but we simply do not talk about it until a variant of concern appears on the horizon and the Department of Health announces that there's a possible approach of a variant that would have to increase alert levels. So, we do not constantly live under typhoon alert level 0. And so I think this is the imagination, that the alert system will remain, but we're not constantly aware of it.
All right, and if ever the government really does remove the alert level system, what other alternative warning schemes or metrics could be used? For example, if testing, for example, is a lot lower, or the percentage of tests are lower, what then could we use as metrics?
Well, I think just like when you see with other endemic diseases, the primary concern is not necessarily cases, but hospitalizations, manifestations of severe disease. So you can imagine that what we would be looking at in the future is we would be looking at the number of cases of COVID that are increasing in our hospitals. And again, I do not imagine that we have to invent a brand new alert system. I think the alert system suffices. We simply have to be able to live with it in the same way we live with the typhoon alert levels, with typhoon signals. When it's time, we will go into alert level 1. When there is a concern, a variant of concern. Outside a variant concern, we enter into regular daily life.
All right, Father Nick, once upon a time, you did say, not too long ago, that the Omicron variant might be the beginning of the end of the pandemic. So, by the looks of it now, how do you still stand by your original statement? Does this still ring true to you?
Absolutely. And in fact, you can see that there is a growing consensus throughout the world that we have to shift to the end. And the kind of movements that we're seeing in terms of evolving these policies is precisely the signal that the beginning of the end is here. Again, this is a exit strategy. This is a map. It's not necessarily a timeline. It's about imagining how we will move to a point where we will be living with COVID in the way we live with measles and flu and many, many other viruses.
Right. So that's, of course, the best case scenario, Father. But what if, just what if there is another mutation? I mean, all virologists say this is just a matter of time, and this is the natural state of viruses as well as other living organisms. Are you inclined to think, based, of course, on research and data, that the next, mutations or variants of concern could actually be weaker than the Omicron variant? Is there a chance that it could be a lot harsher, like more similar to Delta again?
So I think what we see, we cannot promise anything in science, but what we can see is that yes, there will be future variants of concern, just like there are future variants of flu that appear. Some years they are more severe, some years they are milder. We can kind of see that. The question is whether or not there are variants of concern that will trigger the kind of crisis mode that we are in. This, of course, is controversial. There is science out there with mutational landscape analysis that suggests that this is going to be increasingly unlikely. But like all things of science in the pandemic, everything is relatively recent, and so there's going to be a different opinion. However, I think it's important to point out that variants of concern, variants of any viral illness is commonplace, as you point out. And this is why I can imagine that the alert signal will be there so that if there is a true variant of concern, one that would be more severe than Omicron, then we would simply raise the signal, raise the alert level in order to prepare for its arrival, and then lower those signals as the wave passes in the same way we work with a typhoon.
All right, I really like that analogy with the typhoon signals. Father, what are your projections in terms of our COVID-19 trend here in the country? Is it following sort of how you saw it would play out based on how it played out in other countries as well? And if so, can we really sort of start going into that endemic stage by the end of February?
Well, what you're seeing here is what we're seeing in many other countries. There has been a dramatic plunge in numbers. In at least here in the NCR, and there are other regions around our country that are following suit. And so these numbers, given the significant population protection that we expect after the Omicron wave passes, we would expect that these numbers will continue to plummet, and that at some point shortly, we would be able to see the numbers that we saw at the beginning of December. And so our country has to begin to transition to alert level 1. We have never experienced that. We don't really know what it looks like. And so we as a country and as a people have to prepare for that. We have to return our children to schools. We have to return our workers to their office. And we have to return our consumers to the market. And those three different aspects are what's going to have to help us to imagine not only the next few months, but really the next year, as we hopefully for Christmas this year, I have the kind of Christmas that we were used to prior to COVID-19.
All right, I like Christmas as sort of a medium-term goal. Thank you so much for your time and insights, Father Nicanor Austriaco, member of
You're
the
welcome.
Octo Research.
God bless you.
Thank you, and God bless you too, Father.